Hello, welcome to the presentation for the project in Human Factor in AI. The project is about creating a model by using the knowledge and skills to design and consider the ethical and privacy implications in machine learning-based projects. We need to design the user experience of the product with focus of key AI-specific considerations of inputs and outputs, transparency, communication, uncertainty, and evaluate the privacy and ethical implications of the product and so on. So let's see what did we took as a problem, as we were supposed to use the same problem as before in machine learning, managing machine learning projects. We took the same problem, which was for the card products, that we are catching the frauds before it is too late, as recovery does not happen all the time. For this, we created a task analysis that how should the infrastructure look like, data, model, user interface, and what tasks the model should perform, and how the user should get the feedback. So what could be the trigger in this case is any high value transaction that comes for authorization. An action could be checked if the transaction is legitimate and actually by a real customer. There could be a decision based upon suspicious fraudulent transaction based upon the risk score the model will calculate, and then decline or send extra approval for the customer like OTP or web page for approval. Then send or approve the transaction based upon the customer input or the risk score. So we need to have a one decision engine for this model. Machine learning will not decide by itself. Decision engine will decide that whether it is a low risk score transaction, we can approve the transaction automatically, and the risk can depend upon the value of the transaction, geographical data, whether e-commerce or card present, card not present scenarios, and so on. Medium risk could be set up authentication for that and have 3D secure or OTP, and high risk is decline the transaction either automatically or send it to the user or even block the card. Trigger the customer notification could be a notification as well, or it could also be a approval or decline. The decision tree for the task analysis look like a trigger, then we have a card transaction is received, and we fetch the contextual plus behavior data, and action 2 is we score the ML model. If fraud score is greater than threshold, then we yes, decline plus alert, or decline plus approval. If no, then continue. If decision 2 is fraud score between medium and high, yes, set up authentication. If no, then approve. Restore result and update monitoring systems based upon that. User experience design. So we based upon user experience design on Don Norman 6 principle that visibility and consistency should be there. We should show amount based store of transaction or e-commerce store. Every time there is a high value transaction, approval is required. User can define the high value on top of default. So risk scores could be based upon that. Constraint: if user is not online and may not be able to approve or reject the transaction. Mapping needs to happen between user, amount, risk tolerance, convenience, etc. That whether it's some user is traveling or so forth and doesn't want or doesn't have an internet to do approval at the time when he's traveling and so forth, then what to do with the transaction during that time. Feedback. Take feedback on the attributes that lead to a candidate transaction that requires a fraud check. So it can also be a feedback loop about the transactions that we haven't been able to catch as fraudulent, and update the model accordingly and have the new candidate, new attributes to catch it. Then we should have transparency to inform the users on the GUIs that data about the rejection and approval would be used to train the model about the various scenarios that the user is allowing a transaction, even if our model thought this is a high risk, that get the consent for predictions and the actual outcome. So when the transaction is initiated, transaction event happens, then feature enrichment happens, then machine learning fraud generate score happen, decision engine applies threshold rules, whether approve, set up authentication, medium risk, decline or seek approval for high risk. Then we log, monitor, and do the feedback loop. Privacy consideration. As this model would be used in EU, it would be to fulfill the GDPR and PCI DSS. So GDPR makes sure that there is no personal data that is stored for the time needed for the purpose of it. We should have consent for the GDPR data, and data could be like name of the customer, merchant, phone number, define retention rules according for the purpose, and do audits for them. PCI DSS is the card industry standard, and we need to also follow that. So we need to mask the card numbers when communicating with the user, as the data could be leaked in between, and delete the data when action is taken from GUIs, and log checked and security alert generated for any card rates. There also we need to delete the data, and we need to perform the regular audits. Ethical considerations are, if we see in the risks, the model may unintentionally discriminate against certain geographies, age group, immigrants, low income areas, certain merchant categories, cross-border travelers in order to do the risk scoring. What we must do is run fairness analysis by demographic segments, measure false positive rates per group, compare decline rates according to segment, monitor proxy variables. An ethical question to ask is, are we blocking fraud or profiling people? That's a serious line. Then we need to have false positive because it can have a real human impact. If we do decline transaction, it can block somebody's ability to pay rent or decline groceries or freeze accounts. Is model optimizing for fraud loss or at the expense of human dignity? We must balance the fraud loss in customer friction and psychological stress. So we should track false positive rate, customer complaint rate, and time to unblock legitimate user. Transparency and explainability. If the model declines a transaction, customer asks, why was my card blocked? The answer is the system detected unusual activity. That's very weak. The regulation increasingly require explainability, so ethical requirement should be the model must provide reasonable codes, decision logic must be auditable. Internal team must understand why decisions are made. Black box models without interpretability is equal to governance risk. So we should have the model which is able to do the interpretability well. That's all for today. Thank you very much for listening and have a nice day. Bye.